Welcome back after the hopefully fruitful, entertaining, and wonderful lunch break for all of you. I hope you don't start with a food coma, but start with all your full attention. I'm happy to present Julien Oberson from Orange Cyberdefense.
Exactly.
And he will challenge us with his topic on, before I say something wrong, trusted platform module sniffing. And I leave all the great stuff to you.
Thank you very much. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, my talk is about TPM sniffing, and particular part of TPM sniffing when BitLocker is used alongside a PIN code, which is not the case by default, but I'm going to start from the beginning and give you some insight about BitLocker and regular TPM sniffing attacks. Just before we enter in the topic itself, let me introduce myself. So I'm Julien Oberson. I'm working for Orange Cyberdefense, as you said. I've been doing Pentest for almost the past 10 years. I'm also a security trainer, especially for the Windows field. And we are also organizer as Orange Cyberdefense of the Insomniac event, which takes place in March every year in the area of Lausanne. If you'd like to reach me, you can find my LinkedIn and email here. It's also the case on the last slide. It's often easier to take on this slide. So before presenting the attack itself, I wanted to go back to what is BitLocker and what is TPM sniffing to ensure that everybody understands what we are talking about. So BitLocker is the full volume encryption solution provided with Windows in order to avoid having your data left unencrypted on the disk. If you don't have this type of protection, anybody with a physical access to your computer can steal the stored data, including users' data, of course, but operating system-related data like secrets, certificates, etc. If you have this type of access, I mean an unrestricted file system access, you can also tamper with the file system and, for instance, disable the security software or become a local administrator by tampering with some sensitive file. If we look a bit deeper on how BitLocker is actually working, you have a symmetric key that is generated and used to protect the disk. This key is called the VMK. I'm going to use this acronym a lot. VMK stands for Volume Master Key. So if you know this key, you can decrypt the disk. And it's going to be the goal of this presentation to retrieve the key under several circumstances. So the key is protected and often stored in the TPM. The TPM is a trusted platform module, so it's a physical chip on the device located on the motherboard, aiming at storing the key, verifying a few things during the boot process, and only if things went right, release the key for the disk to be decrypted. If the key or if the boot process is not right, BitLocker is going to prompt the user for the recovery key because he realized that something bad has happened. What I just described with the TPM being released automatically is called the transparent mode, meaning the user doesn't have to do anything in order for the laptop to boot. You just turn it on, and it's going to do magically the key retrieval and disk decryption. But of course, in order to add some additional layer of security, you can set up your computer with a PIN or some other factor, but it's not really popular because it's impacting user experience, and companies tend not to use this additional factor because it annoys the user to have a PIN to enter during the boot plus the password when you are on the login screen. So this was just a few details regarding BitLocker, and I'm going to move to the regular TPM sniffing attack as it was described in 2019. So it's a time where the attack was discovered. The attack is based on the fact or on the idea of sniffing the communication bus between the TPM and the motherboard. Because this bus is often a slow-speed bus, usually LPC or SPI, and the communication are not encrypted, which is quite strange when you talk to a trusted module, but it's not the case. The earlier version of TPM just did not support this feature, and the latest version supports it, but Microsoft did not implement it. So if you are able to sniff the traffic, as it's represented on this schema, so you have the operating system, you have the TPM on the right, and you have a sniffer here. And if you are able to do so, you can grab the VMK, so the key able to decrypt the disk, simply. It's usually easier to understand when you have a picture of the process. So I said that the TPM sniffing attack was discovered by Dennis in 2019, and in 2020 we decided to try to reproduce the attack to understand how easy it was to do it in practice. Because when you see this kind of picture, you often are like, okay, it's too difficult, it's probably not practical, and actually it is. For this first edition, it took us a whole week to do it. We had to solder on the motherboard, but we finally managed to do it. We used the exact same device. It's a kind of logical analyzer based on an FPGA, which is called an iStick, and it only cost $40. So it's a pretty cheap device to break the BitLocker encryption. And in a week, we were able to do it. And we realized, and it might be the most interesting conclusion we had with this project, that the difficult part is not technical about understanding BitLocker. It's about how you unmount the laptop to have access to the TPM in order to sniff it, while still being able to turn the laptop on. Because most of the time, the TPM is on the inner side of the motherboard. When I say inner side, I mean you return your laptop, you remove the back cover. It's not on this side. This is the outer side. So it's really convenient to sniff on the outer side, but unfortunately, TPM are often on the other side, so you have to unmount everything, turn it, connect the necessary components in order to be able to start the machine. And it was actually the most difficult things. Back in time, in 2020, when we reduced the attack, the TPM was connected through an LPC bus, and hopefully we had some LPC debug pads on the motherboard. So we were able to connect on this particular debug pad and sniff the traffic from this point on the outer layer, which was quite convenient for us. Unfortunately or fortunately, modern laptops are not working exactly the same nowadays. LPC connection or LPC debug part are no more present because TPM tend to rely on SPI. It's another type of bus, different technology, but still something that is quite slow to transmit information, so quite convenient to get the data from. The interesting aspect with SPI is that it's a multi-slave protocol, meaning that you have one master, which is the motherboard, and you have multiple chips connected on the exact same bus, meaning that if you are able to sniff any chip that is connected to the same bus than the TPM, you can collect the TPM data. And so it's really convenient because on many laptops, you have a flash memory on the outer layer, so easily accessible to be sniffed, and so to also get a copy of the TPM data. So just to summarize the data as we can, the attack as we can do it nowadays, you just remove the back cover of the laptop you'd like to attack. You try to find an SPI chip. Often, as I said before, there is a memory chip that is connected to the SPI bus. So you try to find one of those components on the outer layer. You just get the datasheet to know how to connect it, so which pins correspond to which signal. You sniff the traffic by installing some probe, and in this case, it's not necessary to solder anything on the motherboard anymore, which is really cool to avoid leaving traces on the motherboard you attack, but also to avoid breaking the device. You turn the computer on, you get the data, and you filter the data in order to locate the VMK in the transmitted information. And with this procedure, we are usually able to perform the TPM sniffing attack in around half an hour. This is quite a conservative estimation because most of the time it's even possible to do it in 15 minutes. Because when you've tried HP, Dell, and Lenovo setup, you often have the same type of design. And so when you knew where to look, and when you have a database of which chip to tap for particular models, it's way quicker to perform the attack. And it's really interesting because when you can do it in 15 or 30 minutes, you don't have to steal or to find a laptop to do the attack. You can go in some company premises. You can grab the laptop, for instance, during the lunch break. You perform the attack, and you put the laptop back in place before the user realizes that something happened. So you can access all the data. And in order to go quite fast, we have a dedicated logical analyzer now that is a generic version of the one I just showed you before. And we have a very interesting plugin for this SALAI logical analyzer, which is provided by Secure Labs, which automatically decodes the TPM traffic and extracts the key. So it's really nice to do. The setup looked like this nowadays. So in this example, we have the logical analyzer directly connected to a flash chip. So this is not a TPM. This is just a memory chip on the outer layer of the motherboard that is sharing the same bus than the TPM itself. And so we connect, we run the soft, and we get the key. From time to time, we have to look at the flash memory reference to know which signal correspond to which pin in order to put the probe to the proper place. But there is only a few possibilities, so it's never an issue. How do you prevent this TPM sniffing attack? The easiest solution, or it's really important to do it, is to set up a pin, for instance. So when you have a pin, you have this type of screen that appear during the boot in order to prompt the user to enter an additional secret. And when you do that, you are not able to perform TPM sniffing anymore, because as soon or until you provide the pin, the VM case is not released. So only the user can force the TPM to release the key. So it's a really interesting protection. You can also replace the pin with a USB drive on which a secret is stored, and you have to enter the USB drive during the boot. But a pin or password is much more convenient. So it prevents the TPM sniffing because it's not transparent mode anymore. But we thought, or we think about an attack where a rogue user can use the knowledge of the pin in order to force the TPM to release the key and do some TPM sniffing, even if you have a pin. But of course, you need to be a rogue user. You need to be the legitimate user of the machine. But in this case, you can get a physical access or unrestricted access to the file system, and therefore become local administrator, which for most companies is not expected from a regular user. So it was an idea, but there were no tools to do it in practice. And so this summer, we decided to invest some time into researching how the overall process of dealing with a pin is involved or is done by Microsoft in the bootloader in order to try to decrypt the disk, but also to analyze if the security provided by this second authentication factor is strong. So this was the idea of the project. So starting with the logical analyzer was the first thing we did, but it's not really convenient because you don't have control over everything. You have to reset up the hardware part every time you'd like to do the thing. And so we decided to move to a virtual environment, and we use QEMU and a virtual TPM project called SWTPM. So the idea is like this. So instead of having a physical bus, we have a physical TPM, we have a virtual TPM, and we have a socket in between to connect the TPM, the virtual TPM, and the QEMU host. And we can monitor every single byte sent over the wire, and therefore it helps a lot with analysis. We saw quite a few things. The first one we observed is that when you do have a transparent mode with BitLocker, the VMK is directly sent over the wire. And when we set up a pin and did the same analysis, we saw that we don't have the VMK anymore. We have a kind of blob. So it might be easier to compare both situations with a real example. So we have, in both cases, it's the very last message sent by the TPM during the BitLocker disk decryption. So it's called the unsealed message. And when you are in transparent mode, this is the above situation, you directly have the VMK that is provided by the TPM, sent back to the motherboard, and used to decrypt the disk. And as soon as you enable the pin code, you have something completely different. We can still see a kind of header, but after that, we have an unknown blob. It's probably not random. It's not random, actually, but we were not able to understand what it was. And so we had to dig in order to see what how it could be potentially interpreted. So even without completely knowing what was inside, we observed a few things. First thing, if you provide a wrong pin, you don't get this blob. So the TPM is not answering the unsealed success, and you don't have this blob. So we knew that even if the blob was the encrypted VMK, it will not be possible to brute force it offline by getting this blob from the TPM and iterating on the possible pin, because if the pin is wrong, the TPM is not going to release the blob, which is used to get the VMK. So first observation. Second observation, if you provide the correct ping among multiple boots, you always get the same blob. And this makes us think that this blob was the VMK encrypted with maybe something related to the pin. So this was our first idea of how to understand it. But unfortunately, after many or multiple attempts, we were not able to really understand how this VMK is protected. And so we had to locate the components responsible for the decryption and reverse engineering it in order to understand what's happening during the boot process. So to do that, the first step was to locate which component is responsible for decrypting the disk. So a simple grep was enough to locate it. We knew that the component responsible was an early component, so we look for EF5 modules, which on Windows are located in C Windows boot. And so just by grepping for pin, we saw the string that is prompted to the user to get the pin. So it's the one I showed you before on the blue screen, asking the user for a pin. And so we knew that this component, boot mgfw.ef5, was at least responsible for prompting the pin, and maybe for decrypting the disk. Actually, it's both of them. This binary is quite small. It's only 2 megabytes, so it's quite good when it comes to reverse engineering to have a small binary. And hopefully, or fortunately, the PDB, so the symbols are available, are provided by Microsoft. But we only had function names inside. We didn't have internal structure. So it helps a lot because you know where to look, but you do not know what is passed from one function to another when the various calls are made. So statically analyzing this program is quite challenging, and so we decided to move for the dynamic approach. And so we connected IDA Pro to VMware. So we had a Windows 10 machine with the BitLocker setup with a pin. And so we connected, or we exported the GDB port on VMware, and we attached IDA on it in order to be able to debug the boot process. And with this type of setup, it's quite interesting because you don't have to tamper with the bootloader. So you can do it directly without having any impact on the BitLocker setup running inside the VM. A tool that was really interesting to help in understanding the process was the NTFS tool utility, because it allows to parse the BitLocker headers, because BitLocker has a specific headers before the encrypted part, which contain some cryptographic material. And for every possible decryption solution, in this case, we have the TPM and PIN, what we call protector, but you also have protector, for instance, if you have a recovery key. So you have various ways to decrypt the disk. But in these particular sections, we saw various properties, starting with a stretch key or another properties that involve AES CCM to encrypt some blob here. And those information were really interesting because they are manipulated during the decryption process. And so by viewing those information or those values within the memory, we were able to match them with some clear text data. We were able to realize that it was something that came from the BitLocker header, and so it was really helpful. There is many functions, of course, but two that were really interesting when it came to decrypting the disk. So the first one is get key with pin, which is quite obvious if you ask me. And this function called another one, which is called VMK info process, which, as the name suggests, process the VMK or process the information in order to get the VMK. And when we look into it, we're able to understand that the function actually works through the BitLocker headers to collect all the data, the necessary data for the decryption, talk with the TPM, and decrypt the VMK. And there is actually 3 steps in order to decrypt the VMK. The first important one, is to stretch the pin, because the pin is something between 6 to 20 characters, and you need a key that have fixed length. So you stretch the key to get 256 bit key. Second step, you discuss with the TPM in order to get the blob, and this blob is actually encrypted with a stretch key. So using the pin, you can decrypt the blob I just showed you before, the ones that were not known when we started the topic. And the final step is to decrypt the VMK using the intermediate key. So actually what we saw in the blob is not the VMK itself, it's an intermediate key that allows to decrypt the VMK, which is actually within the BitLocker header. Of course encrypted, but you can decrypt it with the intermediate key. The stretching process was not really difficult to understand because it's quite close to the process involved when a recovery key is used. So we had some example, we had some structure, and we also saw that the second and third operation involved AES CCM, and so it was quite easy to reproduce using Python, for instance. Just to summarize what we discovered by analyzing the bootloader, so first step, we start with the stretching process, which involves a nonce stored in the BitLocker header. So we have the BitLocker headers on the left, a pin provided by the user, and thanks to those 2 information and the stretching function, we get the stretch key. We receive the blob from the TPM. This blob is the encrypted version of the intermediate key, but since we have the stretch key, we can decrypt it in order to get the intermediate key. And finally, using this intermediate key, we can decrypt the encrypted VMK in order to get the VMK and therefore to be able to decrypt the disk. So this was the result of the reverse engineering process. And after this analysis, we also realized that there were several parts in the blob. So the first one was a nonce, or randomly generated value. We have the encrypted version of the intermediate key, and we have a message authentication control in order to be able to distinguish correctly decrypted value from an incorrect one. So when you decrypt the intermediate key, you are sure that you have the proper value. And finally, we developed a Python script in order to automate the entire decryption process because it's much more convenient to have everything in a single script. So we call the script providing the pin and providing the blob we just get from the TPM sniffing attack. And so this script is going to locate, so this script has to be run on a machine in which the disk is connected, because you are going to read the BitLocker header in order to get the necessary information for the decryption process. And so we get the parameter related to the encrypted VMK. We stretch the pin in order to have this stretch key. With this stretch key, we're able to decrypt the intermediate key by decrypting what was sent over the TPM bus. And finally, decrypt the VMK using the intermediate key in order to get the final value that can be used to decrypt the disk. And this is the same value, 93F6, that we saw in the transparent mode, because it was both examples were made on the same machine to have the same value in the end. So with that script, we can retrieve the VMK and therefore decrypt the disk. So this project allowed us to see that it wasn't possible to brute force the pin offline, which is quite good from a defense perspective, of course. But it's still possible if you are the user of a machine to elevate your privileges and become a local administrator or even disable security software by doing the TPM sniffing on your own computer. And with the knowledge of the pin, you can still decrypt it. It's really interesting because when we do some pen tests, we often assume this type of role, meaning a rogue user or legitimate user that want to do something bad with the machine. So we are now able to do it when we do some pen testing stuff. When it comes to fixing or protecting against this type of attack, there isn't much solution, and they are unfortunately not easy to set up. First thing will be to use the cover tampering detection. This is a feature some laptops have in order to detect when the back cover is removed. So I'm not aware of a laptop that provides the possibility to wipe the TPM or the stored secret, but at least you can force the administrator to enter a PIN or a password after the cover being removed. Meaning that if somebody unmounts the laptop to put probe on the motherboard, he won't be able to start the laptop again without going to the sysadmin. So it's something difficult probably to implement in practice, but it's something. Another solution will be to choose laptops that have a firmware TPM, because the attack I just mentioned implies that you're able to sniff on the bus between the discrete TPM, so a physical chip on the motherboard, and the central unit. And so if you replace this dedicated TPM by a software one, you won't be able, it's much harder to sniff the traffic because everything is inside the SOC, and so not easily reachable. And finally, just to provide a last solution, which is not directly related, not strictly related to this attack, will be to monitor workstation for suspicious behavior, like for instance the creation of a new local administrator or security software not being able to start properly in order to try to detect not the attack itself, but the result of this attack. The timing was quite short to have just 30 minutes to present something that took days or weeks, but we are going to publish an article on our blog post later today or tomorrow. And if you are interested to have additional details and some screenshot of the reverse engineering, you can look at blog.srt.ch, which is the former name of the company before Orange Cyberdefense, if you want to see some additional details. And I will also publish a Python script that can be used to decrypt or to resume the process. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you learned some things. And if you'd like to contact us, feel free to reach me directly. Thank you. And we still have 1 minute?
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Depending on the questions, we might not have time for everyone. Please start in the back. Thank you, Julien. Anyway.
All right. Thank you for your talk. It was very nice. I didn't quite understand the part where you said the brute force is not possible offline, because as far as I know, like the BitLocker key is like 8 digits maximal locked by Microsoft, and this is brute forceable size if you just apply your process, no?
So the maximum length is 20 characters.
Oh, yeah, then, yeah.
But people don't use really 20 characters for PIN codes. But I just meant that it's not possible to brute force it offline. Okay, it won't go lower. So it's not possible to do it offline by getting the TPM to return the blob and trying offline various PIN code through the Python script, for instance. But of course, you can enter multiple PIN manually on the laptop and expect to find the proper one. I know that after, I cannot remember if it's 5 or 30, the computer is going to turn off. I'm not aware, I don't know if the recovery key has to be entered after this process, but at least you have to reboot the computer after a few attempts. But this is not what I call the offline mode, it will be online. Does it answer your question? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah?
We had further questions over there. I'm sorry. We have a quicker.
So if you had a chance to perform this attack, and you'd want to do it in a covert manner, how much time would you need to perform it?
So in this version, you still need to find the PIN code. So you have to ask it to the user to find a way to get the PIN code. If you do have the PIN code, it's exactly the same timing that I announced before, so between 15 and 30 minutes.
Okay, is that for the attack itself or just for dumping the system?
It's for dumping the system and getting the VMK.
Okay.
After that, you can boot the machine on a third-party operating system, decrypt the disk, and directly extract the data you want. And this can be done in an automated manner if you are looking, for instance, for the SAM or security or registry hive to get the local password, for instance.
So this could presumably also be done like at the airport if they forced you to give up your PIN.
Yeah, technically, yeah, it's completely possible. Especially considering that they have much more time. We have some experience with some clients having this issue, and they might spend a few hours waiting for the custom office to dig everything.
So I know we had 2 more questions at least, and probably a couple more, but please, in a matter of time, could you please ask them personally to Julien in the end? Because, well, maybe some people want to leave and see the other tracks. Please forgive us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.